The night was silent, broken only by the crackle of a small fire. The human sat alone, eating his last piece of bread. Then soft footsteps from the darkness. A thin alien girl stepped forward. Her clothes were torn, her hands shaking. In her palms, she held out a small, broken toy. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Please take my toy. Human, just give my sister a meal." The human froze. Why would a child offer her only treasure for food? And why did her glowing eyes keep glancing nervously at the shadows behind her, as if someone or something was hunting them? The fire was small, just enough to keep away the cold night air. The human sat close to it, breaking a piece of dry bread in his hands. The ruins around him were quiet, and the stars above were brighter than he had ever seen. He thought he was alone, but then he heard its soft footsteps, almost too light to notice. He turned his head slowly. From the shadows, a figure appeared. It was a girl, thin and trembling, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Her clothes were torn, her hands shaking as if she had walked a long distance. Without rest, she stopped a few steps away from the fire, her face half hidden in the dark. For a long moment, she did not speak. She only looked at the bread in his hand, then at the fire, then back at him. Finally, she took a step closer. In her small palms, she held something out, a toy. It was old, cracked, and faded, but it was clear she had taken care of it for many years. Her voice came as a whisper, so soft that the human almost thought he imagined it. "Please take my toy, human. Just give my sister a meal." The words hung in the air. The human blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. She was not begging for herself. She was not asking for clothes or shelter. She wanted food for her sister, and she was willing to give up the only thing she seemed to own. He stared at the toy in her hands. The way she held it, so carefully, told him it was precious to her. Maybe it was the last thing she had from her family. Maybe it was the only memory of happier days. And yet, here she was, ready to part with it for nothing more than a meal. The human's chest tightened. He felt the weight of her words pressing on him. He wondered where her sister was. Why was she not here? Was she sick, too weak to walk? Questions filled his mind, but the girl only stood there, waiting for an answer. The fire crackled between them, throwing shadows across her face. Her eyes darted to the darkness behind her, as if she feared something was following her. The human noticed how her body tensed, how she kept glancing over her shoulder. She was not only hungry, she was scared. Slowly, he lowered the bread in his hand. His instincts told him to be careful. He had learned long ago that nothing in the ruins was simple. But there was something in the girl's trembling voice that reached past his caution. She was not lying. She was desperate. "Your sister," he finally said, his voice low. "Where is she?" The girl lifted her chin, her hands still holding out the toy. "She is waiting. She has not eaten for 2 days." Her words broke slightly, as if she was afraid they would not be believed. "I will give you this. It is all I have. Please, just a little food for her." The human looked at her again. She was young, but her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. She had learned to hide fear behind courage. He could see it in the way she stood straight, determined, refusing to let her voice shake even when her body did. He wanted to ask more questions. Why was she alone with her sister? Where were her parents? Why was she out in the night, carrying nothing but a toy? But he kept silent. Instead, he slowly reached into his pack and pulled out another piece of bread. He held it for a moment, then extended it toward her. She hesitated, her eyes flicking between his face and the bread. Then, instead of taking it for herself, she stepped back and shook her head. "Not for me," she whispered. "For her." The human felt something shift inside him. This girl was starving, yet she would not eat until her sister was fed. He placed the bread back in his pack, then stood up. "Take me to her," he said softly. The girl's eyes widened. She looked uncertain, almost afraid to trust. But after a moment, she nodded. She pulled the toy close to her chest, holding it tight again, as if she had not expected to keep it. Then she turned toward the ruins and began to walk. The human followed, keeping a careful distance. The night was still, but every sound seemed sharper now, the whisper of wind through broken walls, the distant call of some unknown creature, the crunch of their footsteps on broken ground died as they moved deeper into the ruins. He noticed how often the girl glanced over her shoulder, not at him, but at the darkness behind them. It was not just hunger that haunted her. Something else was out there, something she feared would find them. The human tightened his grip on his pack. He did not know what waited ahead, but he knew one thing. This girl's story was not simple, and the moment she whispered those words, by his fire, his quiet night had changed forever. The ruins grew darker as they walked, the night sky hidden behind broken towers and half-fallen walls. The human kept a steady pace behind the girl, his steps slow but careful. He could hear her breathing shallow and quick as though every corner held a secret she was afraid to face. She held her toy close now, no longer offering it, but guarding it like a fragile piece of her heart. After some time, she stopped and turned to him. Her eyes searched his face as if trying to measure the truth of his promise. The firelight from earlier was far behind them now, and only the moon's pale glow lit the road. "You will give her food?" she asked softly, her voice carrying both hope and fear. He nodded once. "Yes, but I must see her myself. I need to know she is safe." Her small shoulders relaxed a little, though the lines of worry did not leave her face. She turned back and walked again, her bare feet pressing against the dust. The silence stretched between them until she finally spoke again. She was strong once. She used to run faster than me, but now she does not rise when the sun does. She does not smile. The girl's voice shook, though she tried to keep it steady. "I told her I would find food. I told her I would not come back empty. If I returned with nothing." She stopped there, her voice trailing into the night. The human listened in silence. He thought of the bread in his pack. He thought of the way she had refused it for herself, even when she was trembling with hunger. This was not a trick. This was love, pure and desperate. Soon they reached a broken archway. The girl slipped through it with practiced ease, moving quietly, as though she knew which stones could be trusted and which might fall with a touch. The human followed, careful with each step. Beyond the arch, they entered what looked like the remains of an old hall. The walls leaned inward, half covered with vines, and the air smelled of dust and damp stone. The girl stopped near a small corner, where the roof had caved in. She knelt down and whispered, "Sister, I have come back." From the shadows, a faint sound answered a weak cough, barely louder than the wind. The human leaned closer, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. There, lying on a blanket of rags, was another child. She looked even younger, her face pale, her lips dry, her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment they reflected the faint glow of the moon. The younger girl tried to sit up, but her arms were too weak. The older one rushed to her side, laying the toy down carefully before taking her sister's hand. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you I would bring someone." The human knelt, lowering his pack. He pulled out the piece of bread and broke it gently, offering it in small parts. The younger sister blinked at him, then at the food, then back at her sister, as if asking, "If it was safe, it is for you," the older girl said, nodding firmly. With slow, trembling fingers, the younger one took the bread. She ate in small bites, her eyes closing after each chew, as though even this simple act was almost too much for her. The human watched, silent. A feeling stirred in him, something more than pity, something heavier. These two were alone in a place where no child should be. The older girl's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, though she did not let them fall. She sat straight, proud, as if she wanted to show her sister that everything would be fine. When the bread was gone, she looked back at the human. "You gave her life tonight," she whispered. "But tomorrow, what will happen tomorrow?" The question lingered between them. He had no answer, not yet. He could not stay forever. Yet leaving them here felt impossible. Before he could speak, a sound echoed faintly through the ruins. It was distant, but sharp enough to send a shiver through the air. The older girl stiffened. She clutched her toy quickly, holding it close against her chest. Her eyes darted toward the broken archway. The human noticed her fear and asked quietly, "Who else is here?" She shook her head, whispering, "They always come when it is dark. They do not want us to live. They follow us." Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of truth. The younger sister, half asleep, murmured something, and the older one bent down quickly to soothe her, whispering promises into her ear. The human sat still, listening to the silence of the ruins. The sound from before did not come again, but the air itself seemed to hold its breath. For a long while, none of them spoke. The human looked at the two sisters, one lying weak, the other sitting guard beside her, clutching both toy and courage in the same fragile hands. He knew their struggle was not just hunger. Something unseen was pressing on their lives, something that would not stop simply because they had a meal tonight. He thought of leaving, but the thought passed as quickly as it came. He could not walk away. The girl's first words by his fire still echoed in his mind. She had trusted him with her most precious thing. Now she was trusting him with something far greater, her sister's life. The night grew colder as silence wrapped itself around the broken hall. The human sat near the two sisters, his eyes moving from the older one, who sat awake and watchful, to the younger one, who had fallen into a shallow sleep after eating the bread. Her small breaths came unevenly, as if each one was a struggle, but there was a faint color returning to her cheeks. It was not much, but it was a sign of hope. The older girl did not sleep. She sat straight, holding the toy against her chest. Her eyes, faintly glowing in the moonlight, stayed fixed on the open archway as though she expected something to step through at any moment. Every little sound, the shifting stones, the whisper of wind, the flutter of distant wings made her tense. The human could see it clearly. Hunger was not the only reason for their fear. Something else weighed on these sisters, something unseen, but close. He lowered his voice when he finally spoke. "Tell me," he said gently, "who follows you?" The girl's fingers tightened around the toy. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, after a long pause, her voice came out low, almost like she was afraid the ruins themselves might carry her words to listening ears. "They do not want us here. They say we should not exist. They took others away, but we hid. Now they look for us every night. If they find us, my sister..." Her words broke off, and she shook her head quickly, not allowing the thought to finish. The human studied her face. She was young, far too young to carry such heavy words. Yet the way she spoke told him this was not a story made of fear alone. It was something real, something dangerous. He leaned back against the wall and listened to the ruins again. The air had stilled. No distant echoes now, no shifting stones. But he did not relax. Sometimes silence was louder than sound. The younger sister stirred and opened her eyes briefly. She looked up at the human, blinking weakly, then shifted her gaze to her sister. Her lips moved, and though the words were soft, he heard them. "Did you eat?" The older girl smiled faintly and brushed the younger one's hair away from her face. "Yes," she whispered, though it was not true. She had not touched a crumb. The human knew it, but he said nothing. The lie was soft and full of love. The younger sister closed her eyes again, comforted by the answer. Her breathing slowed back into uneasy sleep. The human let his gaze linger on the older girl. "You gave her everything," he said quietly. Her chin lifted, her voice steady now. "She is all I have. If she is safe, then I am safe. If she smiles again one day, then I will have everything." Those words struck him deeper than he expected. He had seen people guard treasures, land, ships, and wealth with their lives. But this child, standing in the ruins of a broken world, guarded only her sister's breath. It was a kind of strength he rarely saw. The night stretched on. Time seemed slower here, as though the stars themselves were waiting for something. The human tried to rest, but his thoughts kept circling back to the girl's words. "They do not want us here. Who were they, and why hunt children?" A faint sound pulled him from his thoughts, a soft tapping, like stone against stone. Far outside the hall, the older girl's head turned sharply. Her glowing eyes searched the shadows beyond the archway. She pressed the toy tighter against her chest, her body stiff. The human whispered, "Do not fear. Stay with your sister." But she shook her head. "They come quietly. If we do not listen, we will not know until it is too late." The tapping stopped. The silence returned, but heavier than before. It felt like the ruins were holding their breath. The human stood slowly and moved closer to the archway. He peered out, scanning the broken streets and leaning walls. Nothing moved, no figures, no footsteps. But his instincts whispered caution. He had survived long enough to know that danger often hid in silence. He returned to where the sisters sat. The older one was still tense, her eyes never leaving the opening. The younger one slept peacefully, unaware of the weight hanging over them. The human lowered his voice again. "Tomorrow, you cannot stay here. You must come with me." The girl's eyes widened. "Leave, but they will follow. They already follow," he said calmly. "If you stay, they will find you. If you come with me, at least you will not face them alone." She looked torn, her hands tightening around the toy as though it could give her strength. For a long moment she was silent, and then she whispered, "If you promise to keep her safe, then I will trust you." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that pressed into him. Trust was not given easily. Not here, not now, yet. She had chosen to give it. He gave a single nod. "I promise." The girl finally lowered her gaze. For the first time since they met, a small sigh escaped her lips, as though some of the burden had lifted, even if only for a moment. The fire from earlier was gone, the warmth far behind them. Here, in the hollow ruins, there was only cold stone and faint moonlight, yet between the three of them one human. To sisters there was a thread of connection forming, fragile but real. The human knew this was only the beginning. The night still held secrets, and the silence still pressed with warning. But now, walking away was no longer an option. The moon had shifted in the sky, its pale light touching the edges of the ruined walls. The human remained awake, his eyes fixed on the open archway, while the two sisters stayed close together. The younger one slept with her head resting lightly against her sister's shoulder. The older girl sat still, almost like a statue, holding her toy as though it was both shield and comfort. She did not close her eyes, but the weight of sleepless nights showed on her face. The human noticed how often she listened to the silence, every small sound from outside, the rustle of dry leaves, the soft fall of dust from broken stones made her glance sharply toward the shadows. It was not just fear, it was habit. She was used to listening for footsteps that never meant safety. Finally, when the night was at its deepest, the human spoke quietly. "You cannot stay in these ruins much longer." The girl looked at him, her eyes bright in the dim light. "If we leave, they will find us faster. They will find you here too," he said calmly. "You already know it. You live every night, expecting them." Her lips pressed together. For a moment she said nothing, then her voice softened. "They do not want us to live. They say our family is wrong, that our blood should not remain. They took our parents. We hid. We have hidden ever since." The human felt the weight of those words. They explained the fear in her every glance, the way she guarded her sister with every breath. These were not just hungry children in broken ruins. They were the last of something their own kind wanted to erase. The girl looked down at her sister, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "She does not remember much. I do not tell her everything. If she knows too much, she will lose her." "Smile. I do not want that." The human understood. Children deserved to carry laughter, not fear. But here, laughter had been stolen from them. A faint sound touched the air then, not close, not loud, but enough to make both the human and the girl freeze. It was distant, like stone shifting against stone, but steady to steady. A pattern. The girl gripped the toy tightly and whispered, "They are near." The human listened. The sound grew clearer, a slow, deliberate rhythm, as though feet were brushing against broken ground. The ruins seemed to carry the noise further, echoing it through empty halls. He lowered his voice. "Do they always come at night?" She nodded. "Always. They search when the stars are high. When we hear them, we hide deeper. But they never stop." The younger sister stirred in her sleep at the tension in the air. The older girl leaned over quickly, whispering soft words to calm her, stroking her hair until she drifted back into rest. The human stood and moved closer to the archway. The streets outside were washed in silver light, long shadows stretching between broken walls. He saw nothing, but the sound was there, closer now, slow but unending. Whoever searched for them was patient, moving with care, as though they knew exactly what they hunted. He returned to the sisters and crouched beside them. "We cannot stay here when the sun rises. I will take you away from these ruins. Somewhere safer." The girl shook her head. "There is no safe place. They will follow." "Then let them follow," he said firmly, though his voice stayed calm. "If they follow, we will keep moving. You will not hide in broken walls forever." Her eyes searched his, doubt and hope warring within them. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "We are not your kind. You owe us nothing." The human thought of the first words she had spoken by the fire. A child offering her most precious toy, not for herself but for her sister. He had seen many things in his life, but never such a pure act. He gave a small shake of his head. "I cannot walk away now." The girl looked down quickly, her fingers tightening on the toy, as though his words had touched something inside her she did not want to show. The sound outside shifted again, closer still. The night seemed to lean in. Waiting. The human lowered his voice even more. "When I say, we move, quietly, stay close to me. Do not look back." The girl nodded, though her hands trembled. She gathered her sister gently into her arms. The younger one stirred, but did not wake, her small face resting against her shoulder. The toy was pressed tight in her other hand, never abandoned. The human listened once more. The footsteps outside paused, then began again, slower now, as if whoever was searching knew they were near. The ruins held their breath, every broken wall echoing with quiet warning. The human looked at the sisters, to fragile lives holding on in the middle of shadows that wanted to take them. He felt the weight of a promise he had already made, even if he had not spoken it out loud. This was no longer just about offering food for a hungry child. Something deeper had begun, something that tied him to them. The night stretched, and the silence grew heavy once more. But he knew this was only the edge of what was coming. The searchers were close, and when the sun rose, the choice would no longer be whether to help them or not. The choice would be how far he was willing to go to keep them safe. The next morning began quietly, but the air around the camp carried a new heaviness. The human could sense it as he watched the alien sisters sit together near the fire. The younger one clutched the small toy tightly against her chest, as if afraid it might vanish. The older sister looked restless, her sharp eyes scanning the forest, as though expecting something or someone to appear at any moment. The human felt a strange responsibility growing inside him. He had only just met these two, yet every movement, every word from them pulled him deeper. The way the little one smiled when holding the toy, the way the older one's voice softened when speaking to her sister, these things made the human feel that protecting them was no longer a choice but something he had already accepted. "Why do you keep looking around?" he asked carefully, breaking the silence. The older sister's eyes met his, and for a moment she hesitated. Then she whispered, "We are being watched." The words struck him like a sudden wind. He turned his head quickly, scanning the trees, the shadows, the rocks. Everything looked the same. Still, the unease in her tone was enough to set his own senses on edge. The younger girl tugged at her sister's sleeve, whispering in a voice so soft it was almost carried away by the breeze, "Don't tell him, he will be scared." But the human shook his head. "No, you can tell me. If you don't, I cannot help." The older sister's face hardened, not with anger but with the weight of secrets. She finally leaned closer. "There are people our kind who do not want us to survive. We escape them. They want something we carry. They will not stop." The human felt his breath catch. The little one's toy, the pleading eyes, the desperate request for food, it all began to make sense. They were not just two lost children. They were running from something far larger, something dangerous enough to make them leave everything behind. "But why you?" he asked quietly. The older girl glanced at her sister, then back at him. "Because of her. My little sister holds something. They believe it belongs to them, but it is hers, and I will not let them take her." Her voice trembled at the end, and the human could see the fight between fear and courage burning in her at that moment. The younger sister reached out her small hand and touched the human's arm. "You are kind," she said softly. "Please, don't leave us." Those words pierced deeper than anything else. He nodded, his chest tight. "I won't." The campfire crackled gently, but the peace was only on the surface. The human knew now that he had stepped into something that would change everything. He was no longer a stranger who had stumbled across two lost girls. He was part of their journey, part of their fight, whether he understood all of it yet or not. The night deepened, stars filling the sky above them, as the little one drifted to sleep, hugging the toy close. The human noticed how the older sister's gaze remained fixed on the shadows of the forest. She did not sleep, and her grip on the edge of her cloak was tight, as if ready to protect her sister at any cost. The human finally lay down, but his thoughts refused to rest. Who were these pursuers? What did they want? And why did fate place him here, at this exact moment, between two fragile lives and the unknown danger pressing closer? Somewhere in the forest, a faint sound echoed, a twig snapping underfoot. The human opened his eyes sharply, his heart racing. When he looked over, he saw that the older sister was already awake, her eyes glowing faintly in the starlight. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The human understood. Their time of safety was running out. Something was coming, and now, he was part of it. The human woke up before sunrise, his eyes heavy, but his heart already awake with the weight of everything that had happened. The memory of the little girl's trembling hand offering her only toy still lived in his chest, and the echo of her whisper about her sister's hunger never left his ears. Days had passed since that first night, and now the bond between them had grown stronger than he could have imagined. The girls no longer looked at him with fear, but with a strange trust, something rare, something fragile, and something that felt more valuable than any treasure. The youngest one clung to him often, her broken toy still hidden under her small arms, as if she feared someone might take it away. Her sister, the older and wiser, began to watch him with quiet eyes, studying every word, every step, as if measuring if he truly was the hope she wished him to be. He never promised them anything, but his actions spoke louder. He shared his food, he gave them warmth, and he showed them a kind of care that no one else had given them. But the world around them was not silent. Whispers spread through the streets, murmurs about the human and the two alien sisters who followed him everywhere. Some looked with pity, others with suspicion, and some with jealousy. Yet he never allowed those voices to break the fragile trust that was forming between them. One evening, as they sat under the dim glow of broken lanterns, the older sister finally spoke what had been heavy on her heart. "You don't belong here," she said softly. "You could leave us and no one would stop you. Why stay?" The human looked at her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Because no one should feel alone the way you do. Not you, not your sister. If I can change even a little of that, then I will stay." The younger one leaned against him, her small frame carrying the quiet relief of someone who had been waiting all her life to hear those words. But just when peace seemed possible, a sudden shift came. One night, as they tried to rest, they heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and growing closer. The sisters froze, their eyes wide with fear, and the human felt his heart tighten. It was not the sound of ordinary travelers. It was the sound of someone searching, someone who already knew where to look. The girls clutched his hands, their grip trembling, as if begging him not to let go. The air filled with suspense, the kind that could silence even the strongest. The human knew that the time for hiding was ending. Whatever was coming for them was near, and it would test every promise he had silently made to those girls. And in that moment, under the shadow of fear, a quiet fire lit inside him. He did not know how he would protect them or what price he would pay, but he knew one thing with certainty: he would not let them face it alone.